Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video, we are taking a look at the Amazon Echo Show 11 and Echo Dot Max, along with Alexa Plus, the latest agentic AI that lives and breathes on these two speakers. This review is ultimately about two distinct products, but ones that kind of need each other. So in this sense, we have the Echo Show 11 and the Echo Dot Max, and then of course we have Alexa Plus. The two need each other in order to really be fully functional. Alexa, as we've known it for at least a decade, is basically an AI assistant. So you tell it to do something and then it just does it. But we've gone beyond that now with Plus in that it's more conversational. There's a tonality to the way it talks, and you're able to, well, it's just able to do more for you, especially based on what it is you're asking or even what you're saying. It becomes a conversation. Now, we're going to demo some of that so you can see what I'm talking about. But the point is that we've now entered an age where Alexa is more of an agentic AI as opposed to just an AI assistant. Okay, now starting with the speakers themselves. Okay, the Echo Show 11 has an 11.95-inch screen. It's quite sizable. It's very nice device. And it's easy to appreciate the fact that, for one, you have a screen to look at. This is kind of the main thing. I mean, it's always been the value proposition of the Show devices. The only thing is that you cannot articulate this screen. So unlike the Echo Show 10, you can't just adjust it or tilt it. This is the angle you got to live with no matter where you put it. That does mean that you got to think about where you're going to place it. So if you're going to keep it in a kitchen, for example, you do want it to be visible. And there is a bit of a glare on the screen, naturally, because it's a bit of a glossy finish. So there's something to think about there. But for the most part, I think Amazon's figured out that this is probably the best you can get in terms of seeing it from different angles and seeing what you want to see. Now, the base in the back is kind of like a giant pill, and it's a little different compared to the rounded orb styles that we saw in the past. This is fine. I think it creates a stable foundation for the unit to rest on. And seeing as how you probably won't want to move this around too much, although I think you probably will inevitably do so, at least you know that it's not going to be easy to move or shift out of the way. So it's pretty sturdy that way. Now, the Echo Dot Max is a very different proposition in that sense, in that it's an orb style speaker, similar to what Amazon's done before. As you can tell, very few buttons. The idea being that you're probably not going to be touching this that much, and that is by design. It essentially now, the key thing is that voice, as far as voice goes, voice control, Alexa Plus goes, what you say to this can be the same to this. The responses will be the same. There's no verbal benefit in this device compared to this one, even though one has a screen it's the screen ultimately that makes the biggest difference, because you can visualize a lot of the things that you're asking about or what you're talking about, right? So for recipes, it's a huge deal naturally, but if you wanted to follow a recipe, for example, or get some kind of contextual info based on what you're talking about, it would come out the same way from this speaker as well. A couple of key points I wanted to mention about both of these devices is that in this case, the Show 11 has a much better screen than previous devices do. So resolution is higher, and you can just tell visually that this is an upgrade over the previous model. So this is good. And then with the Dot Max, you have the capability of connecting it and pairing it with another Dot Max for a stereo setup, or you can actually connect up to 5 of them if you wanted a home theater setup. This only works, mind you, with select Fire products. So, or Fire TV products. So the Fire Stick Plus, Fire Stick Max, and the Fire Cube. Those are the only devices that will work for that home surround sound home theater setup. So again, it gets pricey when you put all those component parts together, and you may want to look at alternatives in that sense. But the fact that it is possible and that Alexa basically sets it up for you is pretty good to know if you don't want to get into the weeds technically. Now, when it comes to Alexa Plus, when we're talking about conversational AI and we're talking about agentic AI, this means that everything has to be contextual. You don't have to be as clear about what it is you're looking for. Or in some cases, you can be very, very clear about what it is you want by telling it what you have or what you need. And then that way you can go from there. So for example, let's say now with a recipe, I like recipes as examples because I like the way it's implemented here. So for example, if I say, Alexa, I'd like to marinate some chicken breasts, but I'm looking for some new ideas. What kind of marinades, what kind of spices and rubs can I put together to make something happen here?
Ooh, chicken breast marinades. Now we're talking. Here are some killer combos to jazz up your poultry game. Mediterranean magic with olive oil, lemon juice, garlic, oregano, and rosemary. Or go bold with a teriyaki twist using soy sauce, ginger, garlic, and a touch of honey. For something with heat, try a jerk-style blend with lime juice, scotch bonnet peppers, allspice, and thyme. And if you're feeling fancy, a buttermilk herb marinade with fresh dill, chives, and black pepper will make your chicken so tender it'll practically fall off the bone. What flavor profile's calling your name?
Yeah, but what if I want to go with a fusion? I mean, could I fuse some of these different spices or rubs together?
Absolutely. Fusion marinades are where the real culinary adventure happens. You could create an Asian Mediterranean hybrid with soy sauce, olive oil, garlic, and fresh herbs like basil or cilantro. How about a Caribbean teriyaki mashup? Take that jerk spice blend and mix it with soy sauce and ginger for some serious flavor fireworks. Or get wild with a buttermilk miso situation. The umami from miso with the tenderness from buttermilk is absolutely mind-blowing. You could even do a Mediterranean Indian fusion with yogurt, turmeric, cumin, and that classic lemon herb combo. The key is balancing acid, fat, and aromatics from different traditions.
So you can see kind of how the conversation flows, right? Now, the main thing is that it is adding context even to in situations where or in ways that I would not have expected and certainly wasn't possible with the previous Alexa. So in that regard, it feels more like I have an agent working for me, which is where a lot of that word agentic comes from. So rather than an assistant that's kind of telling me basic things, in this case, it's actually giving me ideas that I can run with. Another cool thing is that you can get into sort of interesting conversations. Like I got into a counterfactual conversation with Alexa Plus over the Library of Alexandria. So let's see, Alexa, do you remember that conversation we had recently about the Library of Alexandria and what would have been had it not burned down?
Ah, the Library of Alexandria. We discussed its significance as a center of ancient knowledge and how its destruction impacted history. If it hadn't burned, we speculated it might have preserved more ancient texts, potentially accelerating scientific and philosophical progress. Fascinating to think about, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and we'll catch up about it later. But thanks for the reminder.
You bet, Ted. Looking forward to diving deeper into that historical rabbit hole next time.
So the thing is, the fact that it remembers things is, I think, very, very key, and it is what kind of adds to the continuity of being of just having it available to talk to at any given time. This goes naturally beyond to just having these types of philosophical debates or discussions, and also to your own situation, your day-to-day life. So if you integrate, for example, your Google Outlook or Apple iCloud calendar, Alexa Plus will recognize some of the details in there and get to know your routine a little bit. Now, doesn't necessarily have to be in a creepy way. It just means that it can remind you of an appointment that you might have forgotten about, for example, or without you telling it to remind you, by the way, right? That's the key thing is that there's a proactive element to this that is very different from the Alexa that we knew from before. One thing I like about that is that it knows also your preferences. So if you don't like spicy food, for example, or you don't like a certain type of marinade or a certain type of spice or sauce, whatever it is, it can remember that. And so anytime it sets aside a recipe for you, it can then just not do that anymore. So we can say, okay, we can leave that out. And they can do this also for a family member. So if you like it, but perhaps your partner or child doesn't, then you can also make it so that there are ways to offset that. It's the kind of thing that can be really useful and it could become old hat after a while. Just like, for example, the usefulness of having documents summarized for you. So if you email documents, it could even be messaging, it could be all kinds of things, basically, that is in text form over to Alexa and then have it summarized for you. That way, you can, for example, if there's a big document that has some kind of legalese in it, or no, I mean, you still should talk to a lawyer in that case, but the point is that if you're trying to parse something down, so it could be something from your child's school, it could be a work document of some kind, anything that you would want summarized and anything that you would want to maybe you want to derive some questions out of it, or things that you should know, sort of pluck out those important details. It can do that for you, and it can do that for a number of different types of documents, especially PDFs. So one good example of this is that you could, for example, you could have, if your child's a student and they're studying for a test, they could upload or send over documents that are all about whatever the test is on, and then have Alexa create a quiz based on that. So that way, in a sense, your kid is going through a test before the actual test. It's pretty interesting, right? One of those things that could be useful in a way that really cuts down the time to piece everything together. I should also mention that there's a local flavor to all this. So being in Canada, since this is the first country outside of the US that Alexa Plus has expanded to, there is a localization that comes into play here. So certain Canadianisms will come into play, and those are regional too. So for example, the way weather patterns might work in the Maritimes compared to the prairies or the lower mainland of BC compared to southern Ontario, all these things will apply based on your location, and Alexa Plus will be on top of that. It will recognize those nuances. Kind of, that's a pretty cool thing to have, just like it is, just to see also the way it knows our hybrid measurement system. So, going kilometers to feet and inches, for example, or saying the word a on occasion. Those sorts of things are part and parcel of what Alexa Plus kind of does on a day-to-day basis, and something that you probably will take for granted after a while because it just works. Even with a third-party integration. Now, this is where things kind of get interesting because most of it is not functional yet. So while you can get a table at a restaurant that on open table by just asking for it, you can't necessarily order food from Uber Eats yet, or even order a ride from Uber at this point. Yelp, TripAdvisor. There's a variety, even Ticketmaster. There's a variety of different integrations that are already available in the US that we have not had, as of this review, are not operational in Canada yet, but Amazon says they are coming. So then there's privacy, right? Now, all this stuff with any agentic AI, privacy has to be front and center in the whole thing. And this is where, training language models requires, well, training material. Your voice is one of those training materials. Everything that you say to Alexa will be recorded and go to the cloud. There is no on-device processing anymore. That's gone now. So everything has to go to the cloud. Now, you can delete it. You can have it deleted. But the way it works is that when you set it in the settings, that you could do this in the Alexa app on your phone, in the settings, if you have it so that it doesn't save recordings, what that means is that what you've said goes to the cloud, is processed, and then when the response comes back to you, what you've just said is then deleted. The default does not work this way. The default is that Amazon can keep it for several months in some cases. So you want to be mindful of that if privacy is one of those things that you're a little concerned about, because it does play a role here. This is also of particular importance when it comes to sharing Alexa Plus with a family member, a partner. You both want to use it, but you both also want it to be personalized. In order for that to happen, it has to recognize your voices. So Voice ID, again, not entirely new. This already existed in the previous version of Alexa, but in this case, obviously, because it's far more contextual and you're talking to it more directly, you may want to ensure that there's some privacy there. Now, it can separate both of you as users. That's not the big thing. The thing is that in order for Voice ID to work in the first place, the data has to be stored in the cloud, and it has to kind of stay there in order to train the model on your voice and keep recognizing everything that you're saying. So there are caveats to the personalization here and how they intersect with privacy. And that's why I encourage you to also look through the app and see all the different options that are available, and just really go into what you feel you're comfortable with. Alexa, how do you protect my privacy since I'm talking to you and everything's going to the cloud?
Your privacy is a top priority. Alexa only listens after detecting the wake word, encrypts your requests, and offers multiple privacy controls. You can manage your settings in the Alexa app or by asking me directly.
Yeah, but wait a second. You also have OmniSense, which means that you're using the camera and sensors on board to recognize if I'm approaching you or if I'm close by. How does that work?
OmniSense uses your device's camera and sensors to detect motion and presence. It processes this data locally to recognize when you're nearby, helping features like automatic wake up work smoothly. Your privacy is protected. No images are sent to the cloud.
Thanks, Alexa. I'll catch up with you later.
Sounds great, Ted. I'll be here whenever you need me.
The key word there was locally. So in the sense of omnisense, where when you approach it, when it sees that you are in the vicinity and the screen comes on and it might give you some contextual information, clearly not the case with the dot max, but the dot max can also recognize you're getting close. In this case, that is actually processed locally, which is interesting. So rather than sending this to the cloud, it actually just processes it locally and it works from there. Now, whether or not you feel comfortable with that is up to you because it doesn't necessarily always recognize who it is that's nearby, right? So if there's not that anything private necessarily is going to show up on the screen, but it's just like, if you prefer that the feature not on, you can always turn that off. But as you got a sense here of how it's supposed to work. I'm going to finish off with the speakers and the sound here because look, in either case, you're not getting booming audiophile type sound. That's just not what's going to be delivered here. The Dot Max is one of those speakers that's very good for background music. You got a couple people over, you want some tunes playing in the background. This can do the job. It's fine. Again, not going to wow you with the audio quality, but I don't know that was necessarily the purpose to begin with. I think it's more of a conduit to the voices, to the agentic AI, and just the fact that it can play music is great. And of course, with Alexa, you can always ask for the kind of music that you want based on the services that you're using. So Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer as well, Amazon Music Unlimited, of course. No Tidal in Canada yet. It does work in the U.S., but I have not seen it work here so far. So, not every single service, and certainly not YouTube Music. I'm not going to get that either. They sound fine. I think for most people, I think they'll be more than serviceable. But if you really really care about audio quality, this is not going to be at the highest level. And that's my review of the Echo Show 11, the Echo Dot Max, and Alexa Plus. Putting them all together. You can check out more about it by clicking that link below. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.